Hello, everybody. This is Dwayne Newstater and Tony Tressel. And then today, our special guest on Tree Actions is none other than Todd Kramer with KTS, Kramer Tree Service. And Todd, this is the Human Forestry Podcast, where tree people talk about tree stuff and not just tree things, but how being part of being part of trees in the human forest, how it's affected not only our lives professionally, but how it's affected our lives personally. So it's not a it's a little different kind of tree chat. So we often kind of start asking people how they would describe how their seed germinated into this human forest.
Yeah, I got started doing tree care. Obviously, it's a family-owned and operated business, so it's kind of the same story as many other people. I had many jobs, though, before I worked for the family business. I was a caddy for a long time. I worked at a grocery store. I worked at an ice cream store. I tossed, newspapers in the lawns. I kind of did all those things. And, once I started getting into high school, I just wanted more money. And my dad's like, hey, during the summers, you can work for me full time. Like Tony and I, we were talking like 60 hours a week with overtime, and benefits and stuff. I'm like, all right, I'll give that a go. Plus, I was definitely one to always be outside. I was never gonna survive in a building.
Right.
And I graduated high school, and I had enough money I saved enough money to go to college, but I just wasn't feeling it. Yeah, and I liked the work during the summers, and they didn't let me do anything. I was just pure labor, but observing the crews either working solo by pruning by themselves and or the necessary teamwork in a removal process. And back then we didn't have any tools. We had rope and chainsaw. That was all we had. But I just kind of liked every day was a brand new challenge. Everything was different. And then once I graduated high school, I decided to go full time. But then also my father encouraged me to further my education. I didn't go for a degree or anything, but I did take a bunch of business classes at a local community college. Again, not to get a degree or anything, but just to have some kind of a basis of the potential future decades down the road. And then once I got into climbing, I was on those 17 or 18. That was a very quick addiction. Yeah. And it was also extremely competitive. So the way our organization was working is you only got opportunities to do more if you performed at a high level, whether that's raking. So you're good at raking. Okay, we'll let you use a chainsaw. You get good at that. We'll let you do this.
Right.
That's how it was in the 80s, the late 80s and then into the early 90s. That's how it all kind of got started. And of course, I like the community. Later in my career, we got involved in trade organizations and more education for our company. And then it's like, man, we're like all the same.
Right. So your first experience was less, it was just the tree business, and that wasn't even that connected to, or your memory of it wasn't connected to the competitions or the associations. It was just the family business.
It was just a family business. Yeah. Yep. And once my brother and I got involved full time, my brother's 1 year older than me. He does, for the last 20 years, he does business development. But my brother's a 7-time Illinois tree climbing champion, 7 years in a row, consecutive.
Wow.
That record will probably never get beaten in our lifetimes. 7 in a row.
Right. Interesting.
Then once we became members of the trade associations, and this kind of really started when I think it was 1989 when Don Blair came to the International Tree Climbing Championship, which was at the Morton Arboretum, which is in our backyard. So it's literally from where I'm sitting, it's a 15-minute drive. We went there to watch the competition, and we didn't know about blocks or lowering devices. Chainsaws and rope was all we had. That's all we were using. And Don Blair's showing us how to footlock. He's showing us these tools. We bought them all. And my father was like, yeah, we need all this stuff. So let me get this straight. I can put an anchor. I can be smarter than the tree. I can put an anchor anywhere. I don't need a branch union. So then our involvement in ISA, TCIA, we became fully engulfed in that. And then still back then in the early 90s, the only way to get any kind of training was to be active in the tree climbing competitions. So we learned that in the very late 80s, and my father made my brother and I go. It was a company requirement. Voluntold, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
And then being a very, very competitive person, I really enjoyed that. Because again, that's the only place you were, at least in the Chicago area, it's the only place you could learn, because there was no training available. It just didn't exist.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Don Blair. I mean, he comes up routinely in our podcast with the people we interview, and we actually had Don on the show, and we probably will have him again. He was. I remember, and I was talking to Don, and afterwards we had a conversation. He said, "Dwayne, this is an excellent thing you're doing." He says, "Do you realize that when one of us dies, a library burns down?"
Yeah, he's right.
And so he said, it's really good that they're, and not just like man, the history of arboriculture that he went through was astonishing and like in true Don Blair fashion. But what do you relate to? Like, what do you remember as far as your first experience with a rope and a harness and a knot? Did you like, what was the first thing you climbed with or on, or what was it like? What do you remember?
Oh, I clearly remember. My crew leader, he was good at understanding people's limitations. So we started off in smaller trees, obviously, but one of his things is you have to learn how to prune before you can climb. So it was, pole tools from the ground. We didn't have pole saws. We only had pole pruners. My crew leader didn't believe in using those tools while climbing. So you learned how to use it from the ground, right? But then, it was a non-locking steel snap, 3-strand rope, and a 4D harness, like everybody else, and did that for years. Because there really wasn't any other products available that we knew of. This is long before the internet. This is long before cell phones.
Yeah,
that was all there was.
So did you clip the 2 rings, like your butt strap rings? Did you clip them with one snap?
Yeah, no
like
spread
together?
bar. Yeah, pushing your hips in. You can't spread your legs apart. You can't stem.
Yeah.
And that's where we learned how to climb, though. Where we would keep our climbing, we would climb the structure more than using the rope. The rope is there to protect us.
Yeah.
But because when it's weighted, it pushed your hips in, we learned to climb the structure more to keep our rope a little loose.
Yeah.
And we didn't even use lanyards. We didn't even own a lanyard.
Yeah. Interesting. It's funny because a lot of people would be the opposite. They would have a lanyard, right? And they'd use that, but they wouldn't necessarily have the rope. I remember a guy one time, he was just adamant, like, a lanyard's all he needs and forget it, right? And we're already in the days of having a split tail system or split bridge, and I showed him. I just took a climbing system with a blade, put it around the trunk of the tree like you would if you're going to spur it, and I just had the hitch. I just clipped it to his D ring, and I clipped the lead end, the working end of his line to his other D ring, and I said, "Just have a look at this." And he says, "Holy crap! This is like a 150-foot lanyard." I said, "That's it." And it was all of a sudden, he was like, and that was it. He's like, I could, instead of it's like, there you have it, right? So all of a sudden it was like, that was all it took. That simple little example, but by putting it to his hip D-rings, that he could say, so if I move it down here, that means, I get it, right? But you were doing that without a lanyard. You never did have a lanyard in the beginning. That's interesting.
Yeah, we would just free climb. We didn't have throw balls. We didn't have any of that stuff. So it was a ladder on the tree. You climb up, and then you make a monkey's fist, and good luck.
Yeah.
Because we did have lanyards, but we never used them because they were not user friendly. There were those the floating pressics, like they'd only get down to like 2 feet, and they'd only go to like 5 feet, and the adjuster is always nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So if we needed, like if we're getting to a big removal and we got to reposition, we would just use 2 climbing lines,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. Interesting.
And then
Wow.
eventually we saw that there was fixed prusik lanyards, basically
Yeah.
just a miniature moving rope climbing system. We're like, well, this
Yep.
is way better. Yeah, it's super simple.
Yeah. It was. It's still one of the simplest, most effective lanyard systems I think there is.
Yeah,
That's still quite commonly utilized, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Todd, I'm curious, Todd, like in as your climbing system evolved and you got more advanced, was there like one light bulb moment or was it just small incremental steps over time?
It was definitely small incremental steps. It was first the harness. Let's get a different harness,
Yeah, exactly.
and then
Big ring.
eventually, probably yeah. Well, so your hips, so you can be athletic,
Exactly.
something
Yeah.
athletic. But by then I was already rock climbing heavily, so I started doing that
Oh, okay.
when I was like 17. So I'm like, these harnesses are no good, and I would just use my rock climbing harness half the time and
Yeah.
modify it, and they're like, you're going to kill yourself with that. Uh, yeah, once a harness, and then of course once the split tail came out, and then that really opened the doors to where it made the climbing, in my opinion, significantly safer, because before the split tail, we really weren't re-anchoring ourselves in the tree. We would pick out one anchor point and have to commit to it, because we didn't. The only way to like retie in is untie everything and pull the other end of your rope through that branching, and it doesn't get stuck. So we would just take risks, But we learned how to climb though.
Oh yeah.
Because we weren't using pole saws. We'd use pole pruners for like dead tips. And if you really, really had to use a pole saw, we would take a handsaw blade and put it in between the blade and the anvil of the pole saw. I mean, of the pruning, pruning pole, and then wrap the string around the handle, and now you have a pole saw.
That's a new one. I haven't heard of that one before.
Yeah, but once that split tail came out, uh, and especially terminated ropes, where you can really anchor yourself in a better way. To me, it made the work way easier and way safer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can totally relate. I was trained to get up to your tie-in point, as fast as you can. Just climbing. I'd have literally my climbing system clipped to my D ring, so it wasn't in the way, and up you go. And if try not to cut anything on the way up. If it's in your way, you have to just make sure you got a good hold of things. No lanyard, nothing, and just up you go. And I think now about it, and it seems crazy, but you know, it was mentored to me. I saw it be done, and it just seemed like I was the way it was done. I didn't even view it as unsafe. Some people, I remember the odd time, some be a customer or a new person on the crew would be like, "Man, that doesn't like. What if you slip?" Or and huh? I don't. You're not going to slip. You just hold on.
Here's a great quote I learned from my crew leader. I'll never forget this. But we're in an aerial lift, so this is early to mid '90s, and they only went up 50 feet, and there was this white oak we had to prune, but it was like a forest tree, so it wasn't very big, but it was very tall. And in
Yeah,
Chicago, our trees don't really get very tall, you know.
yeah,
So, but the lift didn't go up to the first branch. So my crew leader's in the lift. I got one leg in the lift, one leg out. So like it wasn't even powerful enough. It says right on it, the working load limit, we're definitely violating that. So we would like bounce the machine, like bounce the boom, and then we're up as high as we can and it doesn't reach. We don't have throw balls. So he's throwing my rope and he can't make it to the first branch. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, I'm not even anchored to anything. I got one leg in the basket, right? And
yeah.
he throws like 8 or 10 times, and he just looks at me and goes, "Well, go on then." And I'm like, go on where? Like shinny up to the first branch, like shinny it.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
get up to the first branch, and then you can put your climbing line on, And I'm like, what if I fall? And he looked at me and laughed, and he said, "No one's fallen yet." And away I went.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, no one's.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm not going to be the first one.
I shinnied right up there.
Mhm.
But yeah, we would free climb as much as we can until we got to the top of the creek. And that's what, like, even ISA in publications way back in the day, 3 points of contact. That's where that
Yep.
originated.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know. It's quite astonishing. It is. And, what do you think, Todd? Is that like what advantage or does it give us or any those of us that grew up through that or like our career started with that? Like you made the comment already, you learned to climb the tree. Like, is there value in that or what is it different with climbers these days? Like there's guys that, they don't even know what double rope is. They only know SRS, right? They don't even know retying and redirecting hardly it matters because they just, walk through the tree and spider web their way through it. Like, what do you think about that? Like, and how, or is there a way to impart that? Or maybe SRS kind of gives them that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think SRS and moving rope, they both definitely have their place. And just in my opinion, particularly if you want a very long career, I think you need to include moving rope like often, especially
Right.
in anything that has a lot of spread. So like, I kind of define with the training I do anywhere I do it, but most of it is here at Kramer Tree. Like some of the guys like SRS and like moving, like all the older guys prefer the moving rope, more
Right.
traditional ways. All the young kids, it's all about the gadgets and this and that. It's so tribal. They got to have the boots and the pants and they all got to buy their own hard hats. I'm like, I'll buy you a hard hat, like the good kind. I want a Protos with I'm like, well, I'm not buying you that, but I'll get you a
Yeah.
cask.
Yeah.
But I just tell them it's like, okay, picture your anchor point and go out 30 degrees. That's good for SRS. Anything more than that, I would go moving rope. And I was able pretty easily define this for them to be safer. So like, let's say you're out on a long limb, like a big cottonwood or an oak tree or something, and you have the
Yeah.
very spready trees like we have up here, and
Yeah.
you're on SRS. You don't have that third point of contact. So once you're coming back in on the limb, and your rope slacks, it slacks from your harness. So you no longer have
Yeah.
that balance point on your harness. With a moving
Right.
rope, one side of that rope is slacked as you're tending it, but you still have pressure on your harness, which makes it much
Yeah.
easier to balance. It's a
Yeah.
third point of
Yeah.
contact,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I can prove that to them, but they're still like, oh, you old man, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's the strangest thing, and you can slap on a quick type of Z rig 3-to-1 type of rad system on your and then if you anticipate it in time but even that it's funny. It's like that some sort of geriatric attachment that solves the problem you're talking about coming in from a limb, but it's like it's too much to bother with. They're just going to grunt it out. It's really odd to me where that is. It just do you think it's just a generation thing, or like an old guy, young guy thing, or is it a lack of understanding?
I think it's just a lack of understanding, and I think it's a lot of like when I train in the company, somebody who's never climbed, we're going traditional. I'm going to make you use a Blake hitch
Yeah,
with a connecting link, and that's all you get. And you're going to do this like in small trees, though.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
going to
yeah,
do
yeah,
this.
yeah.
You're going to do this for like a couple of months.
Wow.
And then their coworkers always like, just go to the store and buy your own gear, and we'll show you how to do it. And that usually actually happens.
Right.
We'll show you how to use a split tail, and but I make them learn. I mean, all you need is a rope. So I've had some of these younger climbers who were trained from YouTube University. If they don't have something, they can't do it.
Right.
It's like, oh, I dropped my pressic. I can't even come out of the tree.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It is interesting. Like how much value. I remember I had gotten a new rope sent to me. This is probably 10 years ago. So DJ was, he'd been climbing already a little bit. He'd been doing summer jobs, working at different tree companies. And, so this rope was here and he's like, oh man, I don't have any stuff. I said, well, you don't need anything. You can just climb with the rope. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, you can actually, what do you mean just the rope? I said, just the rope. Well, it is helpful, but he's like, well, you need a harness. I said, no, yeah, actually, you could actually kind of test it out if you had to. You could, well, and I was just surprised because I had never showed him and he had never seen it. So did the bowling on the bite and made the harness and long tail and closed system and like just the rope, literally nothing else. And he couldn't believe it. He still thinks it's cool to this day. Like, he likes to show it. And we were co-teaching a rescue course. Like it would have been, he was helping me at a course maybe a month or two later. And he's like, Dad, show them how they can do it with just a rope.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't shut up about it. And everyone on this crew was like, there was like 8 people or whatever. They're like, what? You can't, you need a rope. You need like, he's like, no, seriously. So I ended up having to do a rescue. It was a short, it wasn't hard or anything like that. But it was like, they were like, you literally could do it with just a rope, nothing else. And so it's not, comfort isn't a feature of the technique, but it actually isn't even all that bad, really. Like, especially with these new ropes, the new ropes are pretty soft. Like I think I was using Vortex at the time that I tried it on. That's what I was using, which is a little bit thicker and it's kind of a soft lay, and it actually wasn't even that bad. I was surprised, but that everybody we've talked to so far has made the same comment, Todd, as far as the importance or always start with the basics. And it's interesting these days that the basics starts with the Blakes. Nobody says put them on a taut line and I find it interesting because for us, that was the revolutionary, one of the pivotal changes was the pulley and the Blake cinch and the split. But we never hear anybody saying put them on a closed system with the taut line.
I still teach the taut line for just the first day. And the reason there's only one reason I would teach that is because let's just say something happened in your body thrusting, but you're not secured. Yeah. You can tie a taut line hitch with one hand. You can tie dress and set it while holding yourself up. You can't really do that with a Blake hitch.
No.
Right. Yeah. But it's funny. Like I was training one of our younger guys who's a high performer, but he's pretty young. And I had to do an in-tree resistograph, which that can be very difficult work positioning.
Yeah.
And our board certified master arborist was on the ground and she would tell me where to go, where to drill. And then this one spot was like going to be really, really hard. And I had ascended on a stationary rope and then was able to get to where I needed to. So like, you got to go over here now. And it was going to be difficult to get there. But I saw there's an anchor point just, 5-6 feet above it. So I just pulled up the tail of my rope and just made a monkey's fist, threw it through the union, tied a Blake, tied it off to my harness, tied, with a split, no split tail, and just tied a Blake hitch. And I only had to go like 6 or 8 feet.
Yep.
But not to be able to utilize that anchor point, it would have been really, really hard. And one of the trainees was like, so that's why you teach me that. I'm like, yeah, I just solved the problem with my rope in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
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 I didn't need all these. I didn't need a tool. I didn't need a snappy clippy. I didn't need something to put on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Just needed my rope.
So many climbers forget they have a whole nother rope with them every time they use one rope. It has 2 ends. Unless you're climbing on the Mobius rope, you got 2 ropes, man. It's right there.
Yeah, it's right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
It was funny. Don talked about the Instagram arborist, and he made an interesting comment. Todd, I'm curious what you think about this. One of his comments was that there's no so many people are going contract. He said these guys will have like a few years experience. They learn, and all of a sudden they're this hired gun. They're like Billy the Kid out there, or Butch Cassidy, and they're a hired gun. And he said they're not being mentored or trained. All they knew is it's basically the internet and maybe the competitions if they're doing that. And he says you see them on YouTube or on Instagram, and he says they're not very high. They're always on spurs and they're blowing off a big top, and it's like something cool. And he said, I get there being coolness in that, but he says, show me when you're, on rope on 3-inch diameter wood on the edge of a canopy. He said, that's the video I want to see. He said, you're not really, what do you think about that? Is that, like, do you know you mentioned Instagram a couple times, and I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a terrible way to learn. And I don't, we're so used to, in our industry, well, the trades in general, we're so used to learning from experience. And I think a lot of the younger people don't have that ability to learn from experience because there's no lesson plan for learning from experience. But that's
Right.
that's what we did. Like we felled this branch in this tree and then it bounced funny, hit the fence. We like, well, what did we do wrong? We're just learning from experience. And I could never be a contract climber. That seems like suicide to me. Especially if you're doing removals with strangers. Most are undertrained. Like you guys are professional trainers, have been for years. You've trained tens of thousands of people, but how big is the industry? You've not even touched the surface yet.
Right.
So, everybody's learning from somebody else.
It's interesting, Todd. So, like, do you not, like, I'm obviously you guys wouldn't employ contract climbers and you have an established business, but is it a trend there also? Like, is it a trend you're seeing? Like, it does seem like there's a lot more guys. There's always been people starting their own businesses and so on, but it seems like there's an increase in the nomadic hired gun these days.
Yeah, that pretty much doesn't exist in the Chicago market.
Is that right? Wow, interesting.
I've been approached from people not living in the Chicago market, but they live outside the market and they're a contract climber and like, hey, well, I'd like to come work with you guys. But every offer they've given was like they want a percentage of the sale of the job. And it's like, well, no, that's never going to happen. It's our steel, it's our insurance, it's our sales staff. It's like you're going to get an hourly wage.
Yeah,
that we're going to determine. It'll be a high wage.
Yeah,
you have to provide your own insurance and all that. But
yeah.
And they're like, no, I don't want. It's like I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it is interesting, because I think that I know for myself, I guess I should speak for myself. Like, I know when I started the training business, I started because I loved tree climbing and I loved tree work and I wanted to teach people how to do it better. So I thought, and I had a real passion for that. But what I didn't have a passion for, or I didn't know much about, was business, and what it took me 5 years to realize I was spending $1.10 to make a buck.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of money moving through, but it wasn't, I remember the first time it really hit me because a consultant we had used the analogy of, they tried to explain to me margins, profit margin, and the cost of doing business. Because I was the guy that, hey, I need a $500 saw. Well, it's a $600 job. I can pay for the saw. And that was just my mentality. And I think a lot of people have that mentality. It's like, well, you're taking this much. The company's charging this, so you're taking that home. Well, what I was forgetting about, and I think a lot of people, it's like, well, the cost of your equipment has to be divided up over every job. The cost of your insurance, just the cost of doing business, your gas. Like, there's so many things that have to be factored in that create that hourly rate that I wasn't in touch with, and I certainly wasn't doing a good job of it in the training business. And I don't think I would have done a good job of it if I'd become an arborist training. If I started a tree service, I would have gone broke doing what I love. And it took somebody with that acumen to help me. And thank goodness for my wife having the business acumen. And maybe it's just the self-preservation of a mother to figure that out. But like, how did that, do you think, evolve for you and your family business? And can you relate to that in other people and see that kind of thinking?
Yeah, like our situation. My father, very early, like our business started in 1974. So when I went full time in '89, there was 6 or 8 employees, and then my father stopped doing the work and started selling.
Yeah.
And then he was smart enough to understand he wasn't that smart, so we had no problem hiring consultants and lawyers and paying people to tell us what we're doing right or wrong. And that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. And it'll be 50 years next year. We're still heavily invested in our consultants and our attorneys and accountants. telling us
And
you have no
yeah,
money.
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing?
yeah, and I think that I think that's what the like some of the contract climbers because they're going on, they're living off of a gin and juice, so to speak. It's all on piss and vinegar, so to speak. Which is I love the excitement and the dynamicness of it and the independence of it, but you got to really temper that with injury insurance and liability insurance. These things that sometimes you forget. Oh, maybe it's a family or getting older that creates that sense of awareness. But um, it certainly, and it's interesting just to hear that it's not as prevalent in the Chicago area. Maybe it's because of the established companies, and maybe even in the presence of the way the industry associations have functioned in Chicago area or something like that. I wonder why.
Yeah, like we would have a hard time, working with a contract climber for when we have enough climbers. Well, you never have enough climbers, but we have enough climbers. But our company, we're heavily promoting career. So if you're a contract climber and let's say you get a mild injury like a handsaw cut and you're out of work for a couple of weeks, what are you going to do? But once the climbing will end. So what skills have you developed to further your career and stay in the industry? So we heavily promote, yeah, you're going to be a climber for 5 or 6 years. We'll go find another young kid to be a climber, and then you're going to move on to something else, some type of management role, or uh, you know, assisting a sales rep, and then maybe becoming a sales rep, or maybe helping me out. Maybe you can become a part-time trainer, and you don't have to
Yeah,
do the labor every day. You can do something. So we're always promoting the future. So with the contract
right.
climbers, I just don't see a future in their own personal careers. Like, what are you going to do if you get hurt?
I agree with you too, Todd. They miss that, and I think that where they're missing too is like because the trend that we see around here, it's not heavy, but like back in the day, like what would happen is you'd hire an employee, he'd work with you for 3 years, then he'd go start his own business, right? So now you basically training your competitors, which was good or bad. It was what it was. Now they tend to just leave and like they become a subcontract climber. So they're starting their own business, but not a tree business. But I think what I'm starting to see is some of these guys, they have a decent skill set, but
Yeah,
it's not going to improve as fast as if they were the company because every time they go in the job, they're the expert. They don't get to work with people of a higher
Right.
skill level.
Yeah, consistently. Yep. Yeah. What I see a lot of though here, not a lot, but enough that it gets aggravating. Where a young person comes in and they have zero experience. Maybe they worked in the green industry in some way, but they're fit, they're eager. We teach them how to climb, and they're climbing alongside some of the veterans. We have some guys who are still climbing every day, been doing it for 30 years. Extremely productive, right? So as they're working side by side with these people, they realize it's going to take them a very, very long time to get as competent as these veterans. So they just move on to a smaller tree care company where they're now the hero because the small tree care company learned, oh, you were trained by Kramer Tree, boom. So now they're
yeah,
the big shot on campus. Now they're the big guy, right? But they're going for less money, less benefits. Well, probably more money, but less benefits, no future. You know, not the safety culture that we have, right? They don't even have a road
Yeah.
cone out. This
yeah,
is what you went
Right.
to because now you're the
yeah.
top gun. That's
Yeah.
ego.
Yeah, and that's a
Yeah,
pattern I see too.
do you think?
And the way that pattern repeats is like so they go to that they leave Kramer Tree. They go from small fish big pond, right, to big fish small pond. And then that wears off after a year or two. Then they keep moving on. And then they're 15 years into their career and they've built nothing. You know what I mean? Like they don't have the security of long time employment with a company. They're really good technicians, but like you said, someday the climbing ends and you just can't you either can't
Yeah.
do it anymore, you don't want to do it, and they find themselves. And I see so many younger people falling into that trend, and you try, it's like, dude, like just trust me, hang out for another year or two, you'll see it. And they just, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
It almost sounds like we're talking a little bit about patience, and I don't know if that's generational or not. But I don't want to, bash the younger generation. And I don't think that's what we're doing necessarily, but it is interesting. They're definitely, and are we just now the older generation that's talking about the younger generation, the older generation did when we were, I remember thinking I was 8 feet tall and bulletproof and I'd climb anything and you'd challenge me not to, right? But certainly not like that today. So I think part of it comes just with youth too, Rita, and the wisdom that comes with maturity. Trying to impart that is can be a challenge. And I think the internet and the amount of available information makes it a little extra challenging. I think it seems like.
I think it makes it way more challenging because even I remember growing up with my skill sets, like let's just say at my peak of climbing was probably my mid 40s or early to mid 40s is when I was peaking at tree climbing. I mean, like competitive tree climbing, but that also went right into actual production work. But that's a long go. That's 20 years of training, So when I first started, particularly when I first started climbing, I wasn't climbing every day. I was climbing when the opportunity came up. Right. Production was first, and safety was first, but then it was production, and then if the opportunity was there. So it was very, very slow to go from trimming crab apples and river birches to trimming giant cottonwoods. Even though I was very fit and really willing to do it, but it was like, you're not ready for this, kid. We got to let the older guys do it. You learn from the ground. But like you mentioned, with technology and instant information, like back then, there was none of this. There was
no.
It was just you watch the guy. He was the top climber. I'm going to pay attention to what he's doing. Hopefully, one day I can be as good as him.
Well, and some of it, I think some of it comes down to, and I don't know what the right word is, and I want to say the word fame. Like to be able to become the guy with the followers that has the likes that, you put the cool stuff, and then, and nowadays you end up with an ambassadorship with some company because you got enough people looking at your page.
It's ridiculous.
It's a goal. It's literally a goal people have is to, if I could get to 10K, then I'm going to have this. It's like, holy crap. And I don't really know what to think about it, Todd. It's like, it seems like it's here to stay, but there's something seems off to me about it, but maybe it's just because I'm not in that generation. I don't know, but you mentioned it yourself. Ridiculous. Like,
I think it's off too. And one of the problems that I have with social media is I'll see some of these people, I'm not going to name names or anything, but they'll have, 15,000 followers and they'll get, all this stuff and they're one-handing the chainsaw and then they're like anti-establishment,
Yeah.
where it's like, I'm 100% pro-establishment. I think, with the tree climbing championships and having rules to live by and our ANSI standards, that's what's kept me alive and my coworkers, right? Like, is something wrong with your other hand? I don't understand. Do you only have one hand?
Well, they keep it up. They might.
Yeah. But I just don't quite understand that.
No, I just, the social media thing and the YouTube stuff is crazy because it's like literally when you're training, like there's another trainer in the room and that's Mr. YouTube, right? And he's sitting there. And what I tell people is there's a lot of good things on YouTube, but it should never be your first point of reference, right? It shouldn't you should learn something somewhere else from a trusted source and then maybe explore it or learn more about it on YouTube, but it shouldn't be your first point of reference, right? It's this because you just don't know what you're getting into.
Your first point of reference with YouTube should be how to change a tire.
Yeah. Well.
On the stump grinder, right? You got a flat tire on the stump grinder. Let's go ahead and YouTube that one.
Exactly.
Let's not do work at height.
Yeah. No, that's right. It definitely has an application. I just want to shift gears a little bit, Todd, and
sure.
We started talking about the human forest, and I'm curious how you would describe or your comments on how being part of the tree world and just trees in general, like and being generational, how that's affected yourself personally, or even your family, your life? Like, or do you ever make the correlation of lessons learned in the trees that you've applied to your own life?
Yeah, I didn't grow up as a tree hugging hippie, but I learned how to love the environment and work. And when you prune the same tree for 25 years, you get. But what it really did for myself personally, but and my family is just I have to be outside, and if you're going to be
Uh,
outside, the point of being outside is to be in nature.
right.
So I'm pretty fortunate where I live. There's tons and tons of really heavily maintained forest preserves with like crushed limestone trails, so we can go bike
Nice.
riding or we can go hiking, and it's a
Yeah.
5 minute drive. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that transferred over with the rock climbing, with taking my family camping often. And
Yeah.
and then mostly myself and my son doing some climbing. My son doesn't really do that anymore. He's more into being him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, you mentioned climbing and pruning a tree that you pruned for 25 years. You know, can you describe what that like? Do you feel like there's actually like sort of a connection there, like more that's beyond just I'm here to work on this tree and that it's object, or do you feel a sense of connection almost in a in a cosmic or spiritual kind of realm of sorts?
kind of like that, and kind of like almost like ownership. So I'll see like that work order come through for 123 Main Street. It's for me. It's always been American elms. They're surviving American elms,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's like no, that's my tree. Even though the tree's big enough for 2 or 3 climbers, I'm like nope, because I pruned that by myself 10 years ago, and I'm going to do it again.
Okay.
Because it's just I own that tree. It's Mrs. Smith's tree, but it's my tree.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So do you feel that the tree appreciates that? Like, do you sense that at all, or is it just more like I'm just curious? Like when you're in that, do you pause and think about the life that it is, and it's like the fact that it'll probably be outlive you, seeing how it survived DUD.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also a reflection of uh, tools and techniques and how we care for trees. Like when I first climbed this tree, we weren't using friction savers.
Ah,
Then we were using friction savers, and then we're using rope guides, and then we're using pulley savers, and then we're
yeah,
redirecting with textiles and not going through a branch union where the rope is moving. So it's like, man, I'm learning, and the tree's thanking me.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, and what do you mean by that? Like, do you go and look and you can attest to, uh, like, oh man, sorry, I didn't know, I didn't have this, pulley saver, I didn't have this textile to use 10 years ago, and now I'm sorry, I can see what I did to you, kind of thing.
For sure the anchor point at the very top center of the tree,
Yeah,
where we blew. You can clearly tell the growth wasn't there. We can tell clearly bark is off. You know,
yeah, interesting.
yeah. And then the tools
So
came
it's
in,
like, yeah,
and
better to, so you could see like clear evidence that like not rubbing the rope over the bark, the thin bark is better not doing that.
yeah, don't do that. Shigo said it 20 years ago, but it's things move slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Tony says that sometimes the wheels of progress are square
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of momentum to get it to roll to move to the next step,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, and whatever that step may be, like our director of operations, Paul, he's very good at this. Where my father was more like he would say, "We're going to do this now," and he would expect immediate results. Where Paul's like, "Let's change this, but to change this, we need to change the culture. It's going to take time."
Okay.
Like just to get people to actually use a friction saver, and most it's a little easier now. But back when we were learning, right? At least
Yep.
my generation, Generation X, we were never told why to do anything. So that's why
Correct.
progression for me was very, very slow. So you just did it my way because I said so. So like
Yep.
Gen
Yep.
X came in and started fighting authority and questioning authority, you know. But once I was told why to do something, it usually almost always made sense, and you did it immediately. So then training
Correct.
has reversed to where now the first thing I do when I'm training is here's why.
Yep.
Because here's the
Yep.
consequences if you don't. Where I was never given the consequences. I was told you just this is the way you do it.
Yeah. I
You know.
think that's probably the single biggest comment that even to this day that we receive, when I do training, and the first time I really identified with it was when I took the chainsaw course from Tim Ard, because I was
Yeah.
taking the Arbor Master Arbor Games series, and I remember it was the course that I thought I didn't need, and of all the courses I probably learned the most in was chainsaw. But I wanted climbing, and I wanted to learn climbing from Ken, and I wanted to take rigging because everyone loves rigging. But I remember talking to Ken, and I organized the Arbor Games and the Arbor Master Series under my region back in '93 or '4 or something. And he's like, well, but you got to take chainsaw. It's a pre-packaged thing. And I'm like, what? Because I'd fallen quite a few trees at that time. I figured I knew everything I needed to know about chainsaws. And, and that 2 days with Tim, but it was, what struck me was he explained why. Like, it wasn't just, here's what you do. And that has followed me the rest of my training career, and you're talking about it now. And maybe that it just made me think, because is that what YouTube is missing, or is that what YouTube doesn't give, or Instagram? Like, you're not getting a lesson. You're not, like you talked earlier about, there was no lesson plan, and maybe
Right.
that's part of what the is problem with that model.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Tim Art, because like Tim Art was like the very first professional trainer I ever witnessed, who I would have to say was my biggest inspiration to also become a trainer. I was
Yeah,
very young, early 20s. He was doing like a half a day classroom, and then he was going to go fell a tree or whatever. I
yeah,
was young, pretty successful in tree climbing competitions. I'm like, well, what's this guy going to show me? And
yeah,
then he's going to fell this tree, and I'm like, big deal. I'd fell that tree also. I'd put a big rope here and a big rope here, and then it's going to go to the big truck. And
yeah,
no, I'm not impressed, Tim. And he comes out with a couple little wedges. This is a big tree, though.
yeah,
This is a big tree. Comes out and he fells this thing. I'm like, I wish I was paying attention, but just the way he was able to, just why he inspired me is that he was so good at delivering the information, but
yeah,
obviously clearly knew all the information. And I was like, that's a job I want. Not necessarily the chainsaw end of it, but like just in general for the industry. So
yeah,
that really
yeah.
motivated me to open up a book and study. Like,
Ah,
if you want to teach, you have to have extreme, as you guys know, you have to have the content, you have to have on lock, and then
yeah,
also
yeah,
be able to perform it. My personal learning style is, obviously most tree guys are visual learners, guys and gals, but the person teaching me, I'm not really not going to listen to them unless they know how to do it and can actually do it. Right?
right, 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 right.
Kind of like I was certified to be a CPR first aid instructor, even a train the trainer. So I had that certification, and my father was like, you can train everybody here at Kramer Tree, so we'll save so much money, and then you can
Yeah,
train people regionally. We charge them, we
yeah,
make money. So I go to the course, I take the course, I'm all good to go. I have all the certificates. I am a certified CPR first aid trainer. Time to
yeah.
train our company, and I told my father, I was like, not doing it. He's like, what do you mean? We paid thousands of dollars to do this course. I'm like, I'm not qualified. He's like, what do you mean you're not qualified? You got the certificate. I'm like, I've never done it. I've never
Right,
done CPR ever.
right,
And the only thing I've done with first aid is put a Band-Aid on somebody.
right.
He's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I guess a guy trying to teach driver training that doesn't know how to drive, right?
Yeah. But then, yeah, Tim Art, he motivated me to learn how to speak and to understand the content and how to put a program together and how to be able to
Yeah,
communicate that.
yeah,
Uh, so it took me years and years to slowly get there. From the very first time I trained, which was my very first training job was it was a classroom environment for the Illinois Arborists Association to teach whatever chapter 9 in the workbook was, climbing and safety,
hmm,
like
yeah,
2 hours, 2 hours in the classroom. I'm like, I've never taught in the classroom, I've taught
yeah,
guys in the field hands on. I'm like, how am I going to do this? I call up my buddy Mike Dirksen. You guys know Mike very
Oh
well.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
of course.
he was teaching that course down in Springfield. I'm like, well, how do you
Yeah.
teach this course? He's like, and the young guys won't get it. It's like, I'll fax you the outline. Right. So he faxed me the outline, which he just had handwritten. He's like, just follow
Yeah.
this. And I'm like, awesome, Mike.
Right. Yeah.
And I did that like 3 times a year, and then it kind of grew from there to where I became a board member for the Illinois Arborists Association, a voting board member, representing the commercial arborists. And like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to build a tree stand so I can go speak at it at our annual conference,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that got funded. I built it. And that gave me a platform. And then it really expanded when Toby and Vermeer got together.
Yeah.
So what year? That was probably the late 90s.
Would have been, it was like 98. Oh no, it would have been 2000
It was 2000 and because it was right around when they started the Vermeer seminars, right? And so that was like 2005,
yeah.
I think. Does that sound about right? Somewhere in that early 2000s.
Well, maybe just a little before, maybe 04.
Yeah, I think it was a little before that because I remember in our region with Vermeer is the Vermeer Midwest Group, which was owned by Junior Cool, and he has 9 stores. And my father and him collaborated a lot on business stuff, particularly in the mulch area. Like everything we bring into Kramer Tree gets recycled into mulch. So he helped us develop the mulch industry around here, all this. And when Toby and them got together, Junior came up to us. He goes, here's what we're going to do. We're going to shut down all 9 stores for a day. We want you to come in and teach guys how to use the snappy clippies. Teach these guys how to use these tools. So hopefully they come back and buy a stumper.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, all 9 stores. He's like, yeah, in 2 weeks. And each store is like 3-4 hour drive from each one. This is going to be a lot. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this by myself. I don't think I can speak for 6 hours a day, 4 days in a row by myself. And I don't think it's fair for your clients. And I'm like, I'll bring somebody with me. So I call up Mike Dirksen. I'm like, hey, you want to road trip this thing with me? It's going to be a lot of work. And then he's like, yeah. So we did that for quite a few years. And then eventually Nats got involved. Nats is like, we'd like to get a piece of this action. I'm like, you can take it all. This is a lot of work.
Yeah.
But once I was exposed to that, so that's now tens of thousands of people, then the training really kind of took off from there to TCIA and chapter events and then eventually private companies and then eventually consulting private companies and lots of landscape companies.
Right. And Arbor Master made a bit of a move through that area as well in that time frame. They were part of that a little bit. Or was Illinois Arbor Association always more dynamic in its own right?
Yeah, Arbor Masters came through Chicago. I went to the course back in the mid '90s. Yeah, I took the course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was forced to.
We had Rip on the show a few episodes ago, so you might want to check out his interview. It was pretty good. It was fun. We had a great time with Rip.
Yeah, I listened to it. It was good. He's always fun. He's a fun hang no matter what he's doing.
Yeah, he is. He Rip's really good.
And he's definitely one of my mentors. Yeah.
Well, what do you think the future holds, Todd? You made some interesting comments about, training just barely scratching the surface. And, I know Jared's company seems to be growing strong with the academy out in California. And what do you think the future is going to hold with, you got North American out there, you got, we're up in Canada, you've got the academy. I mean, I don't know what else, Tim's still doing his thing. He's as active as ever. And what's the future training look like in arboriculture, do you think? Give us a prediction.
It's so limited, like I'll get asked all the time, like, where can I go for climber training? I'm like, well, you're looking at it, but they don't want to make the investment of their time and their money. So for every training event I do, I've probably given 20 proposals and they're like, yeah, that's way too expensive. I'm like, you're defining it differently, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's the wanting to learn, and the one thing training has done for me, as far as me being trained, is it helps guide your company on how to work safely, how to be productive, and how to give that quality product to your client. Without the training, it would never happen. You'd be doing the exact same thing you were doing 15 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think people just don't want to make the investment in training, even the investment of how to find it. Like, go to an open
Huh.
enrollment; they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Just go
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the internet. Just go find one, and
Yeah.
those are those are very reasonably priced compared
Yeah.
to me going to your company and spending
Right.
time with you, right? That's expensive. But an open enrollment, sure, maybe you got to drive 6 hours for a 2 or 3 day course. Go do that,
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
actual training. Where if you're going to a tree climbing competition, that's really not training. That's more of a demonstration. You're observing. You're not getting professionally trained.
I see. Interesting. Yeah.
But where the
I
future
mean,
of it goes is, I think it's all going machines. I think there's going to be less and less of it, and less. I think there's going to be less of it, and I think there's going to be less demand for it, because everything's going to be a lift.
you're talking climbing this specifically?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and rigging, right? The Susan lifts came around, and they're everywhere. People forgot how to rig. They can just have one sling, one block, and they just constantly move it 100 times instead
Yeah.
of setting up a system first. Taking that half hour to set up a system, and then from there, just reversing ends of the rope. You will work this side of the tree, keep the same anchor points. Now when you do this side of the tree.
Yeah. And the do you think also like the grapple heads and the Cenobogans and even the Altex, all these, they basically put a feller buncher head on the end of a crane. Like, what's the
Yes.
future of that? Like, it seems to be pretty popular. With what's the one out of Italy there? What's that one called?
Oh, I don't even know.
I can't remember.
There's a few. Like,
Some with an M. One starts with an M.
yeah, yeah,
Molding or something. Something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah, it starts with an M. Yeah,
Yeah, like we're heavily invested in equipment, and we think it's great. Uh, I've done a ton of research on particularly knuckle booms with the grabby saw thingy on the end, and it's
yeah,
just not
yeah.
gonna. It's just not. It doesn't. This doesn't fit our business practice. What we can. You hear about. Oh, you no longer need the climber. You do. At least,
Okay,
and then with all that experience with cranes that I have, I think those machines they're gonna fail. There's so
okay,
much deflection. There's so
right.
many moving parts on the outside of the boom,
Yeah, yeah,
and so many undertrained people operating them. Like, you got the insurance card, you're good. Here's the keys. Good luck.
right,
Where
right.
they're not really trained
So
on
what
how
do
to
you
do
think
it.
it'll be? Is overload? Is that what you think will be the biggest problem?
And cycles to failure, I think,
Right.
because it's cranes
Just
they're not made. I mean, they deflect on purpose. But every time I've seen all these social media things, and that thing is just bouncing away every time, because the load isn't centered over the end, right? So it could be to the left or
right.
to the right. So besides bending down, it's also bending right and left.
Yeah.
And I just don't. And there's to operate one of those, it's like you can't have multiple operators. Like Tony, like your aerial lifts, you know, like a bucket truck. Like, everybody knows how to operate the bucket truck, right? It's very quick to learn how to do it. These knuckle booms, there's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so now I'm going to make a $300,000 investment, and then only one guy can operate it. He's off for the week. And now the machine's got to sit there.
Well, and that's on the low end. I think that 300,000.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is when they look at tools like that, they don't think about how does it fit into their current work or business plan. It's a tool and it can be used successfully, but
Mm-hmm.
it has a niche like anything else, and it's never going to replace a climber. It might take some of the load off, and I think that
No,
I've run into some guys that do some really successful work with it, and they're fine. But it's not. It's they're different tools than like a stick boom, and I think where the problem comes in, and I think where you'll start to see the failures and the accidents, is people that get it thinking it's the silver bullet and they can do every removal with it, and it's just not the case. Like, we use one, starting to
it's
use
not
one
the
more
case.
down here, but the thing is, for us, the big climbing removals and stuff like that, we get so underbid on that stuff. We're not doing that type of work anyway, because we'll go in and it's a $6,000 removal. Some guy will be like, I'll do it for $1,000. Like, okay. What do you want me to tell you?
I don't need to.
Yeah.
I don't need to practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But so what we find is that a lot of our removals tend to be a little more specialized. So the tools can work for that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no silver bullet. There's no, like, it doesn't. What I see here is I can't tell you how many guys I run into in the Philadelphia area. If they don't have a crane, they don't know how to do a removal. Like, they don't even know how to set a block. I'm like, what do you do all day?
Yeah,
right.
It's
like I guess it has its purpose, but it's kind of funny to see it and the kind of the evolution. I think it'll swing back around. Hopefully it does, literally and figuratively.
Just be another tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another tool that gets utilized out there, for better or worse, I guess. Depends. I think a lot of it, I think probably comes down to attitude, and if you're looking for, I think this kind of applies to life. If you're looking for one thing to fix everything, you're going to look, you spend a lot of time looking for love in all the wrong places and you find most of them, but it's not, there isn't one thing that fixes everything. It just isn't the way life is. And that's one of the things about the human forest, I think, that I guess maybe getting older or whatever, but there's so many analogies in trees and tree care, like even the elm you talked about that you feel an ownership for, Todd, like what if that tree could talk, what it's experienced and what it will continue to experience and what it's undergone in its static way of, it can't slap you, it can't tell you what for, it can't say, why the hell did you do that to me? It just endures through your learning, and it endures and you're caring for it every time as good as you could, as good as you knew how to, but it's changing, right? And the tree's just allowing you to do that. And every time it's a little bit different. And that's, I think, part of the journey or the progress of life, right? And maybe our job as senior members of this industry, is to try to temper and convey that importance, of, there's never one thing going to fix everything, like single rope technique, like the grapple boom, right? And like you said, can you tie it with one hand? I've heard people say that, well, when the hell would you ever have to tie something with one hand? Well, I don't know, but it's nice to know you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you were talking about, where we think training is going, and one of the limitations, I think, is that people who, everybody thinks they know everything, of course, right? But I think what people aren't doing is training themselves for the future. Like, right? Like, okay, I'm doing this work, but I can't do it forever. So let me start training now to learn a new skill, right? Like we were talking to Tony before Dwayne got on. Like, what am I doing with my time right now? Like, most of my time is I'm trying to train somebody to replace me.
Right.
That's basically my job title right now, is get somebody to do your job, But I don't think people are looking to, like, where do I want to be 5 years from now? And I can get training now so that when I get that position, I got my foot in the door. I have a base knowledge of how to do whatever that position may be in the industry.
Well, I think I know for myself, for a time in my life, I didn't think past the end of my nose or didn't plan past the end of my nose. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is having an idea of where you want to go and how you're going to get there. Because if you're just going day by day, you don't know where you're going to end up if you don't have a plan. And having that's something that, I don't know, I guess at a younger age, you don't think about it, but at some point that becomes evident where you need to start thinking about that sort of stuff. And I don't know when that transition occurs exactly, but.
And I think I was lucky enough for my crew leader who taught me how to climb, who worked for us for 30 years and since retired. But even at a very young age, he was like, you have the biggest opportunity at this company because you have a high school education. Nobody else did, So I was like, okay. He's like, you got to start, you got to be thinking. It's like, you're going to end up being smarter than me. And if you're not, that's a problem. I'm like, and then my father was very, very pro training. He was very pro-education. When I was 20 years old, he said, by the end of the year, you will be a certified arborist or you will not work here.
Wow. Well, I found it interesting what you said about you're right now basically training someone else to take your job. And I remember somewhere, somehow, I can't remember who said it, but I heard, basically if you leave anywhere, your job or your involvement in something and there's nobody there that knows what you did or how to do your job, you fail.
There you go.
Because at least that should be one of your prime directives is to get at least one person up to the speed that they can do what you did. And that otherwise, how can anything continue? Right.
Exactly.
It's not going to continue, right, without that happening. And even going back to the human forest, like trees are such an example of that in community and helping the other trees, not even just trees of their own species, but they're a very communal organism, very connective organism, and helping everybody grow in a connective fashion together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And instilling people in the importance of education and learning, like I'm going to be training you right now, but I'm going to be learning something from you as I do this. This is how this works.
Yeah.
Some of my biggest revelations as an arborist have come like when I started to think about what I'm saying at a training course, and I sit down like the way I delivered it caused me to reevaluate it in my own brain, and then that allowed me to kind of change it around. And that's why I learned the best by teaching, and that's why I've always loved teaching so much, because I learned so much from it.
Yep. Yeah, I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed public speaking. Always enjoyed, especially the later ends of different topics, not just cranes, not just rigging. Like more of the leadership stuff and generation stuff. That's the point in my life where this will have better value to other people, because other people can give a crane talk just as well as I can.
Well, and I think you realize that it's just like what you've been talking about, the legacy of things. It's the old saying of, teach a climber to climb and he'll climb, but teach a climber to care for a tree and himself and others, and you give him a life, right? Not just a career.
Yeah.
Right. That analogy of the fish, but applying it to an arborist, right? And that's, I think, what you're kind of talking about, because, and that, what's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about that as, and it is our age, where our children and watching them move on in their life and so on, you realize it's time to give back in a different way, well, that's kind of the reason the podcast kind of got started as well. We're just old guys talking, guys and gals. It's been interesting. In this particular talk, for some reason, I've been thinking, we haven't had everyone we've been talking to are people that we know. So it's a generation that's a little bit outside of the scope. Tony, we need to maybe get another perspective of somebody a little younger on the show.
Nah, they ain't got nothing worth saying.
Hey, I'm still pretty young.
Yeah, I'm pretty young too.
You guys are the old guys.
I know. Okay, Tony, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm dating myself.
You're getting so old up there.
It's funny though when people ask me, like how long you've been doing this? It's like, well, actually June 1st, just a few days ago, that was 34 years of full time work. Yeah. Like what were you, 10 when you started? Like no, I was 18.
Yeah. Well, I find that's interesting too, Todd, because I don't know what it is, but I find all of a sudden one day I realize there's not a lot of people that stick with a career for even 10 or more years, or 15 or 20 or 25. Like I'm at 30, I started 87 basically in the trees, right? So it's 30 some years as well. Like, why is it? I know it's not just in trees, but it doesn't seem as common for people to stay in a career path for this long anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I definitely see that because they get bored, they want to move on. They get bored and move on, and it's like, what do you work? Are you working for fulfillment? Are you working for money? For me, it was both.
Right.
I loved completely love the industry, but I did make a financial investment,
Right.
of my money, like when I was married with kids, and I told my wife, I'm like, we're gonna loan out every penny we have, and I'm gonna buy, a small portion of the company, going to Vegas, So yeah, but even if I didn't do that, I would always be in the industry, just because I knew, especially as the industry grew and got more educated, there's going to be positions available, right? I'll always be able to get a job,
Right.
as long as I get trained.
Yep. Yeah. 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 Interesting. Well, Tony, do you have any sagely closing questions for our friend here? You always have. Todd, Tony comes up with a sort of a question of the day for our guests, and they're sometimes the same, but sometimes I never know what he's going to come up with. So I'm curious what he's thought about for Todd, for Mr. Kramer here.
I don't know. Mostly the tradition is Dwayne just does this and throws me under the bus to come up with something real fast. That's the usual tradition.
Of course.
Yes, I bet.
Good.
I don't know. I just
well, I give you a good setup.
you do give me a good setup.
You do
give me a good setup. And we talked about it briefly in the course of this. And you've mentioned a couple of times, the involvement in the tree climbing competitions and all that. And I think, I wonder what you think. What's the future of all that going on? I mean, Dwayne and I think we came up with the analogy when the ITCC was in Washington, D.C. What was that, 2018, something, whatever, that the ITCC, as it stands now, is kind of like a big old tree.
Yeah.
And it's getting to the point where I think it's probably past its peak, but it takes a while for an old tree to kind of fade off. I just wonder, with your involvement and your, the amount of time you spent doing it, where do you think it's going ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, it has definitely changed from when I started doing it. Like when first time I competed, we did have to tie our taut line hitch with one hand for the speed climb off the ground, like 5 or 6 feet, because you had to do that once you rang the bell, because there was nobody belaying you.
Right.
That's what the rules were, And then things progressed and more rules, things got safer. But what I kind of see with the competitions, just simply the rule changes, and it's getting to me to be a little more ESPN like I'm really against the ascent event. It just makes absolutely no sense. Nobody does this.
Right.
Nobody's running up a tree, right?
Right.
Like you can like mix that event with maybe a throw line event at the same time or something. For you got to install a rope. And you have like 3 different anchor points to choose from that are predetermined. I don't know. Right. Like that event and Bleed Speed Climb, I'd like to see more challenging Masters challenges, bigger trees. I understand that'd be very, very hard for the volunteers to be able to do that, but something a little more difficult and more surrounded around air rescue, work climb, and Masters challenge.
Interesting. So I guess the speed events really are like they're fun to do and interesting to watch a little bit. They're quick as well, but they're not neat. None of them, even Footlock, was never really reflective of actual work. Like nobody ever went up as fast as they could ever.
Yeah, and there's nothing that like we mentioned earlier with the tree climbing championship, especially back in the beginning of it. It was the only technical training was even available. But what are you going to learn from a Blade speed climb with the rock climbing holds glued onto a tree? It seems to be like a waste of time. Why don't you just take AR and make it a 10-minute event, or make it a 12-minute event, or make it an 8-minute event, right? And get better at that.
Well, and there was a time where people were talking about it, and Saga was always kind of baffled by this, like why there wasn't a pruning event or an event that had skill with a saw or even a chainsaw, like the game of logging type of competitions, not so much the lumberjack event, but where, they're like all arborists use cutting tools, and there's no event to measure someone's skill with that, And everyone says it's too hard to do or too hard to set up, but I don't know. I would think there's got to be a way to set that up, that way to measure your proficiency.
Arbor Master kind of did that with what was it called, Arbor Games or something? I forget what he called it.
Yeah, Arbor Games.
It was kind of like that. But yeah, those things can be involved. like there could be an event as an arborist where you just got a stick in the ground, you got to go fell it, and you can get graded on it.
Yep. I'm noticing, there seems to be a subtle trend slowly starting to emerge, like with the Jambos and the, what's the other one called? And now the thing that's happening out in Quebec, I don't think that's the same as the North Americans. Is it? Is that like, it sounds like that's kind of a new kind of regionally funded, and the regional events that are happening at Pacific Northwest particularly, they have like 6 or 8 events a year, and
Really?
they have masters and everything, and they're not only 2 of them, or well, only one is the one that will qualify you to go to the internationals, but there's a whole bunch of others you can go to. And like, do you think that there will ever see that place where there might be a whole nother I guess there already is with Jambo, and what's the other one called? Arbor Expo or whatever. No, but you know what I mean? Like, do you think there's a future in that, or has ISA got the hold on that?
I think there's a future in that. And I think there's some good and bads to it. I've never been to a Jambo, but I've had some of my coworkers go, and some are like, it's great, and some are like, it's not so good.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
Because they're not as strict with rules.
Yeah.
I think the more the better, though, because it increases the community.
Yep.
As long as everybody is going by the ANSI standards and what's practical. I don't want to see these crazy rope angles because you're doing that in public, and now everybody says, "Oh, that's okay."
I agree.
Where a chapter event, and particularly the ITCC, where you have entry tags and you have communications to the ground, where somebody who's competent can verify an anchor point. Because as a head judge of Masters Challenge in Illinois, since I retired in 2016 from competing, no, you're not leaving the ground.
Right.
That's not a climbing anchor point. Like, why didn't you tell me earlier? I'm like, that's against the rules. Read the book. I'm going to let you do whatever you want, but I'm going to stop you before you leave the ground. But like, the more of those that have competent people, the better.
Right.
I think it's good for the industry.
Yeah.
But then the hard part is, do you have competent volunteers?
It is. That has always been, I think it continues to be the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Sure is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a great tool to drive education and, progression in the industry. And I too believe that it will eventually kind of work its way out. I don't know what form it's going to look like, but I think it will change over time. And it's a great tool. You can draw a straight line from my career through the tree climbing comps, just literally a straight line. So I look forward to what they're changing.
Oh, like 100%. Yeah, if I was never involved in tree climbing championships, we would not be having this conversation.
Yeah, I could say that unequivocally as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Sometimes I wonder if there'll be, almost like another type of group formed, potentially an association of that's just, it's only around the practical. It doesn't get involved with, all the other things about arboriculture. It's ultra focused on safety, the standards, doing it right, and the comps are maybe less frequent but very stringent, and maybe get the industry itself would raise the bar on it. It's like, it's just, you got to have your shit together if you're gonna not only win this but just attend it and be part of it, and that there'd be maybe a group of volunteers that would just take it to a level that we all, maybe there's a few of us out there that wish it would be done, but I don't know if any of us have the energy left to take something like that on.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with ISA. Like years ago, they asked me to chair the ITCC, and I just had three simple questions for them. I said, let me have a look-see at the job description, let me see the budget, and let me see the chain of command, the org chart. And they couldn't provide any of that. I'm like, well, I can't do anything. I need this information to make this decision. But part of that, not getting the volunteers, in my, it's just an opinion though, but I think you would have a much better chance of getting high quality volunteers if you can at least cover some of the travel cost. Like, you don't have to pay them, even though they're technically a competent consultant, but pay my airfare, please. And I'll be there the whole time. I'll volunteer all of my time. But there's volunteering time and there's volunteering resources, and they're not the same.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And what do you think would be the, what's the word I'm looking for here? The incentive, or what could be a catalyst to make something like that kick off? That I have given it a lot of thought, and my son is quite passionate about it because he's getting into the career climbing, and he sees all these changes, and he's been watching it since he was a little kid, even watching you climb. He watched you drop the pulley in Hawaii, right? And it's like, he's learned from that, and he's preparing for when he gets to do this, but it's changing so much. He may not ever be able to like, first of all, footlock's been taken away. It's gone. Like, he's never going to have that chance to be the fastest at footlock. And he kind of laments that. There's probably a few like him. So he's one of the ones pushing me in this realm, saying, what's the next thing going to be where there's really going to be something that's really high level? And I just don't know how to make something like that. And I agree with you 100%. It's got to be, if there was cost covered, and I think a lot of people, if it didn't cost them to get there and be there, they'd probably be willing to donate their expertise to something.
I think so, 100%. Because my father's always been very much, those associations, TCIA and ISA, have been very good, and IEA, Illinois Airport Association, they've been very good to us as a company and as a family, as far as getting us basically trained, or opportunity to do the training. So if you have success, you got to give back, but you can only give back so much for nothing. Even here in Illinois, basically Kramer Tree, for the most part, prunes all the trees for the competitions. We set it up. We provide the most amount of labor. We provide the bucket trucks. Davey helps a ton too, but not as much with people,
Right. Yeah. That's really interesting because, Tony, with what you asked, the question you asked about the competition being like an old tree, I wonder how much of it is the old maintenance model. Like, maybe the ISA tree climbing competition trees they haven't switched from rope over the branch union, and they haven't switched to multi-savers. And maybe that's what we're talking about. There's the model has exhausted what they've drawn too much blood from the stone of the volunteer pool that's been out there. And that's what needs to change. Maybe that's what the industry's ready for. That's an interesting way of looking at it, Todd. And I hear the same thing all over the place.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'd like to see change, though, in the competition scene, and even in the climbing in general, with all this stationary rope technique so popular, particularly for pruning, and I've seen damage to the trees, particularly anchor point.
Wow.
Where, okay, you have this rope. It's not really a static rope. It's semi-static, right? One end of it is fully loaded. This would only be a basal anchor, not a canopy anchor.
Yeah,
but that's a popular thing. Just that rope stretching over that union with all the way down one side, there's damage every time.
Oh, interesting.
Like, you need to put some kind of a friction saver in there, like we used to do. Like, you can't have, unless you're using the canopy anchor, you're damaging the cambium. And Dr. Alex would not be happy.
Well, that is a very astute observation, and that's really cool because I have to admit, I just never have grabbed into the SRS train, and when I have done it, I feel better with the canopy anchor because of the not double loading, and I know that's a big controversy. Well, if you spread it far enough, it's not exactly double. But now it gives me even more fuel for my personal fire of, it hurts the tree too anyway, which makes sense, but I haven't actually witnessed it myself or had anyone else mention that before.
Yeah, I've witnessed it, and just imagine this. Let's say you have your rope going through your primary anchor point and then redirected through 3 or 4 other anchor points, creating all of that drag, right? Creating a ton of friction. And I've seen them do it. Now these climbers are having to pull down really hard on this rope with a very tight braid, right?
Yeah.
There's no way you can tell me that's not damaging the tree.
Yeah, now you're damaging 3 or 4 unions instead of one.
It's the same force as tying a 200-pound log on a lowering line that goes through a branch union and lowering it. It's the same force. It doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think.
Right.
Yeah, I think all new climbing advances should solve a problem. If they don't solve a problem, then I don't think they're advances. But that's just me being a curmudgeon. I think should solve an issue, should solve a problem.
Yeah, and there's also just they're just exactly like solve a problem. Like example being one of our ANSI standards says you have to have a cinching anchor point if you're going to be on a spar, right?
Right.
And that's just something you have to do, and I'm a huge fan of that. And then I'll see on I'll be at a workshop maybe teaching this topic or teaching somebody here at work or whatever. And like my go-to is simply all our ropes at our company it's required to have a splice termination, a climbing line.
Yeah.
That's just a company requirement. Just tie a bowline. And now you're going from moving rope to stationary rope, and just take the tail of your rope and put it through a carabiner through the splice die, maybe tie a munter hitch or just hang on to it. Now you have a very good, super fast, super easy, retrievable canopy anchor that you can use stationary rope with the tools you already have. And there's other people will be showing me, oh, you got to get this clip or this slick pin, and you got to add all these components. I'm like, why? Why do you have to add? You're just making it. This is just so you get more likes on YouTube or whatever. Look what I invented. Oh, you invented something complicated.
That's funny.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been your closing question, Tony, turned into a whole nother discussion, which I think is very interesting.
What happens
so
when you throw me under the bus.
Maybe this will be the first podcast. It might be the first time we'll have to have a feedback mechanism and see what people's thoughts are on our discussion of having what would you call it? The ultra, the tree clock ultra or something. I don't know what you could call it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm sure we'll hear about it.
Yeah.
No, sure.
All right.
Sure.
Well, Todd, thanks very much. I appreciate all your time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Yep.
You're welcome very much. It was a great talk, and I look forward to